It was Christmas Eve in a small town blanketed by snow, where the air smelled of pine trees and sweet cinnamon. The streets shimmered with a million twinkling lights, and every shop window displayed festive decorations, colorful wreaths, sparkling ornaments, and snowflakes that danced in the soft glow of street lamps. The holiday markets were brimming with life, children's laughter mingled with the sweet sound of Christmas carols being sung by a local choir. The scent of hot cocoa and roasted chestnuts filled the air as families wandered through the market, buying last-minute gifts and savoring the spirit of Christmas. In the midst of this festive chaos stood Sarah, a 22-year-old who had grown up in the heart of this picturesque town. She had always adored Christmas, its magical aura, the warmth of family, and the joy of giving. But this year, things felt different. The absence of her mother, who had passed away from cancer just a few months earlier, loomed over her like a cloud. For Sarah, Christmas had always been a time for family traditions, baking cookies, decorating the tree together, and sitting around the fireplace as her mother read them stories of holiday miracles. But now, those moments were just memories, and this Christmas Eve felt quieter, emptier. As she stood by the town square, the soft snowfall kissing her cheeks, Sarah couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. She had tried to push it aside, telling herself that she needed to be strong, for her dad, for her younger brother, and for herself. But deep down, she knew that this Christmas would be the hardest one yet. The house was decorated beautifully, her father had made sure of that, but there was a noticeable absence around the dinner table, a gap where her mother once sat, her presence filling the room with warmth and love. Sarah had always been a huge fan of Taylor Swift. The way Taylor's songs made her feel understood, as though the singer's lyrics spoke directly to her heart, had been a comfort through many of life's ups and downs. Music had always been her escape, and Taylor's songs had given her strength, especially in the face of grief. This year, Sarah's biggest wish for Christmas was to see Taylor Swift live in concert. She'd saved up for months, but tickets had sold out quickly, and now it seemed like an impossible dream. Little did she know, this Christmas Eve would bring her the kind of surprise she could never have imagined. At that moment, as Sarah was lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzed. It was a notification she almost missed amidst the bustling crowd. Her fingers hesitated before she opened the message. A link to a live-streaming event. Confused, she clicked on it, not expecting much. But when the screen loaded, her heart skipped a beat. There, on her phone, was Taylor Swift, standing in front of a fireplace, wearing a cozy red sweater, with a large Christmas tree decorated in the background. The screen flickered as Taylor smiled warmly and spoke directly to the camera. "Hi, Sarah. I know this Christmas has been a tough one for you. You've been through so much, and I just want to remind you that you are not alone. Christmas is about love, and it's about the people who lift you up. This one's for you," Taylor said, her voice soft and sincere. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Was she dreaming? Her mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Taylor Swift was talking to her. "You've always supported my music, and I know how much you miss your mom right now. I'm sending you all the love in the world. And I've got a little surprise for you, too," Taylor continued. "I want you to meet me tomorrow, at a very special place, for a Christmas surprise." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her emotions swelled as the video ended, and she was left staring at her phone, heart pounding in disbelief. The feeling of loneliness she had carried for so long seemed to fade as a wave of hope rushed in. It was as though the universe had reached out and reminded her that magic could still exist, even in the toughest of times. Without thinking, Sarah rushed home, her feet practically flying through the snowy streets. When she burst through the door, her father and brother looked up in confusion. "Dad! You won't believe what just happened," Sarah exclaimed, her voice trembling with excitement. She quickly showed them the video on her phone. Her father's eyes widened in shock, and her brother let out a loud, "No way. I don't know how this is happening," Sarah whispered, still in disbelief, "but tomorrow. I'm meeting Taylor Swift." Her father smiled, his eyes softening as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe this is the Christmas miracle you needed, sweetheart." In the weeks leading up to Christmas, Sarah had never imagined that this holiday would bring her such an incredible surprise. But as the sun began to set on Christmas Eve, her heart was full of gratitude, and her mind was racing with anticipation. Tomorrow, her life would change in ways she couldn't yet understand, but for now, she was just grateful to be reminded that even in the darkest times, there could be light. The next morning, Sarah woke up with the early light of Christmas Day spilling through the curtains. The magic of the previous night still lingered, but now there was a buzz of nervous excitement in the air. She had received a cryptic text from the team managing Taylor Swift's surprise event. She was to meet Taylor at the town's community center at noon. She had no idea what to expect, but the thought of meeting her idol in person, especially after such an emotional year, felt almost too good to be true. Yet, as Sarah hurried through the morning, the lingering weight of grief seemed to grow heavier. There was something bittersweet about this miracle. Her mother would never be there to see it. The ache of missing her mother on Christmas morning, when Sarah needed her most, felt like a silent shadow, hovering close behind her as she dressed for the big event. "Dad, I'm heading out now," she said, her voice a little shaky, as she grabbed her coat and bag. "Good luck, honey," her dad replied, trying to sound encouraging, but Sarah noticed the sadness in his eyes. He, too, felt the void her mother left. It had been hard on him, trying to keep up the holiday spirit while dealing with his own grief. As Sarah made her way to the community center, she could feel the warmth of the Christmas cheer in the air, but her heart was heavier than she wanted to admit. The hustle and bustle of Christmas Day in the small town was distracting, people out shopping, kids playing in the snow, but it couldn't drown the ache she felt inside. She had been so focused on this magical opportunity to meet Taylor that she had forgotten the deeper meaning of the season: love, family, and togetherness. When Sarah reached the community center, she found a small crowd gathered outside, eagerly waiting. The building itself was decorated in traditional holiday style, its windows covered in festive garlands, and the entrance adorned with a giant red bow. But as Sarah joined the crowd, something felt off. A sense of disarray seemed to hang in the air. People were talking in hushed voices, shifting anxiously on their feet. A few moments later, a member of Taylor's team stepped forward to address the crowd. "I'm sorry for the delay, everyone. We've just received some news," the woman said, her voice tense. "Unfortunately, there's been a change of plans. Due to unforeseen circumstances, Taylor won't be able to make it today." The words hung in the air like a cold gust of wind. Sarah stood frozen, her heart sinking with the news. She blinked several times, trying to process what she had just heard. The crowd murmured in disappointment, some expressions marked with confusion, others with frustration. Sarah's chest tightened. She had dreamed about this moment for so long, and now it felt like it was slipping away in an instant. She thought of her mother again, and the unfairness of it all. Why did it feel like the world was always full of disappointments, especially when you needed something good to hold on to? Just as she began to turn away, crushed by the news, the event coordinator continued, "But, we have a special message for Sarah." Sarah froze in place. She felt the eyes of the crowd turn toward her, a flush rising in her cheeks. How did they know her name? She was no one special. Just a grieving daughter who had hoped for a miracle. A volunteer stepped forward, holding a phone out to her. "Here. This is for you," the woman said, handing her the device. Sarah took the phone hesitantly. Her fingers shook as she held it up to her ear. She could hear a familiar voice on the other end, calm and comforting, though tinged with a sense of regret. "Sarah," Taylor Swift said softly, "I'm so sorry I couldn't be there today. Something unexpected came up, but I didn't want to leave you without a Christmas wish." Sarah could barely breathe. Her mind raced as she processed what Taylor was saying, but the words didn't fully sink in. She wanted to respond, to tell Taylor how much this meant to her, but all that came out was a choked sob. The phone slipped from her hand, and she instinctively reached for it, but the event coordinator caught it before it could fall. "I didn't want you to feel forgotten," Taylor continued. "You've touched my heart, and I know how much this Christmas has been hard for you. So, I'm sending you a little surprise. Keep an eye out for it, it's on its way." The line went quiet, and Sarah stood frozen in place. The crowd around her seemed to fade into the background as a realization washed over her. This surprise, while it didn't look like what she had envisioned, was something else entirely. It wasn't about the meeting, the glitzy reveal, or the public display. It was about the thought, the care, and the gesture behind it. But just as her emotions began to shift from disappointment to something softer, something more hopeful, a voice broke through her thoughts. "Did you hear that? This whole thing is a scam," someone in the crowd muttered. "They probably picked a random fan's name out of a hat to give them a moment of attention. What a joke." The word stung, and Sarah felt her heart drop. It was as if the magic she had been holding onto for the past 24 hours was being shattered by one cruel comment. She had wanted to believe in the goodness of the season, in the power of kindness and surprise. But in this moment, doubt crept in. Was this just an illusion, a hollow gesture for a world that was growing increasingly cold? Was the Christmas magic just a far-off dream? As the voices around her grew louder and the disappointment lingered, Sarah had to take a deep breath. This moment, even if different from what she had imagined, held a truth: the spirit of Christmas wasn't found in grand gestures, but in the simple act of being seen, heard, and loved. As Sarah clutched her phone, the world around her seemed to blur, the harsh whispers of the crowd growing louder in her ears. A cold wind swirled through the festive streets, the once beautiful decorations on the community center feeling distant, almost hollow, in contrast to the growing unease in her heart. Christmas lights twinkled above her, their cheerful glow mocking the chaos inside her chest. She had been so close to something magical, and now it seemed to slip through her fingers just as easily as the snowflakes that fluttered around her. The mutterings from the crowd didn't help. A group of disappointed fans gathered around Sarah, their faces pinched with frustration. Some were holding up their phones, recording videos of the scam that was unfolding before them, others talking about how they had been ripped off or how unprofessional it all seemed. The disbelief in their voices matched the crushing disappointment Sarah was feeling. Her dream of meeting Taylor Swift had been shattered in front of everyone, and now she couldn't shake the feeling that the surprise wasn't meant for her at all, that it was a cheap stunt to appease the masses. "Hey, are you okay?" A voice pulled Sarah from her spiral. She turned and saw an older woman standing beside her, her face marked with concern. I'm fine," Sarah lied, forcing a smile. The woman raised an eyebrow, her warm eyes not buying the act. "Don't let them get to you. People can be cruel, especially when they don't understand what something like this means to you." She glanced around, her gaze hardening. "There's a lot of bitterness in the world, especially during the holidays. But Christmas, it's about more than just the surface, isn't it?" Sarah nodded slowly, but her mind was racing. She had always believed that Christmas was about more than materialism, more than perfect presents and grand gestures. It was about the intangible, the way a shared memory or a kind word could light up the darkest moments. But now, in the face of all this negativity, that belief felt like a distant echo. The woman smiled gently before turning to walk away, leaving Sarah with a lingering sense of warmth. Despite the cruel words from the crowd, this stranger's kindness seemed like a small beacon of hope. It was a reminder that, maybe, the Christmas spirit still had a place in this world, even if it had been hidden behind the weight of other people's judgments. With a sigh, Sarah turned and began walking toward the parking lot. She had no idea what Taylor's surprise was going to be, but she couldn't help but feel a tiny flicker of hope that something good could still come from this. The chilly air stung her cheeks as she passed the rows of cars, her mind shifting between the anger she felt at being let down and the anticipation of the unknown. As she reached her car, her phone buzzed again, interrupting her thoughts. It was another message from Taylor's team. She opened it hesitantly, half expecting more bad news. But this time, it was different. Please check your front porch at home. A special delivery is on its way. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This was it, this was the moment she had been waiting for. She didn't care if there was a crowd or if it wasn't the big public meeting she had imagined. It was enough that Taylor had remembered her, and the surprise wasn't over yet. Racing home, Sarah could barely contain her excitement. The disappointment of the morning still weighed heavily on her, but now it felt more like a distant ache, something manageable. As she pulled into the driveway, the sight of a large box on her front porch made her breath catch. She slammed the car door and hurried up the steps, the chill of the evening air doing little to cool the warmth building in her chest. When she reached the box, her hands shook as she lifted it. It was heavy, larger than she expected, and had a large red bow on top. No card. No indication of who had sent it, only the shimmering ribbon and the weight of anticipation. With trembling fingers, Sarah pulled the ribbon free and opened the box. Inside was a thick, plush blanket, soft, creamy white with silver thread woven through it in delicate patterns. As Sarah unfolded it, something slipped out from the folds, a handwritten note. She held her breath as she read the words. Sarah, this blanket was made for you, with love and care. It's something to wrap yourself in when you need warmth, when you need to feel close to those you've lost. I know it's not enough, but I hope it helps you feel comforted this holiday season. You are never alone. Taylor. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she cradled the blanket in her arms. The weight of the moment hit her all at once. This wasn't just a physical gift, it was a gesture of love, of understanding. Taylor hadn't just sent a blanket, she had sent a piece of comfort, a small reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light. It wasn't about the grand event, the public display. It was about the heart behind the gesture, and it was enough. But before Sarah could fully absorb the depth of this surprise, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway caught her attention. It was her father's old sedan, and she watched in confusion as her dad stepped out, a large grin on his face. In his arms was a wrapped gift, small but elegantly adorned. "Merry Christmas, kiddo," he said, walking up to her. Her heart swelled with affection for him, and she held up the blanket for him to see. "You won't believe what just happened. Taylor Swift, she sent me a gift." Her father's eyes softened, but he didn't seem surprised. "It's not about who's giving the gifts, Sarah. It's about how much love they carry with them. You're surrounded by that love." As she sat down on the porch steps, holding her gift close, Sarah realized the holiday season had unfolded in a way she hadn't expected. The world had seemed dark, and the weight of grief had threatened to swallow her whole. But despite everything, the disappointment, the misunderstandings, the fleeting moments of doubt, there was a warmth in the air, a quiet peace that whispered of new beginnings and unexpected miracles. The snow began to fall more heavily now, each flake catching the light like 1,000 tiny stars. And for the first time that day, Sarah allowed herself to smile. The magic of Christmas hadn't disappeared. It had simply taken a different form, one that was less about spectacle and more about the quiet, beautiful moments of connection. It was enough. It was more than enough. The evening sky deepened into twilight, casting long shadows across the snow-covered lawn as Sarah sat on the porch, holding the soft, silver-stitched blanket close to her chest. Her father, still smiling warmly at her, took a seat beside her on the steps, the weight of his own sorrow visible in the subtle slump of his shoulders. But the grin he wore spoke of something greater, a quiet, unspoken hope. "You're holding on tight to that, huh?" he said, nudging her gently. His voice was tender, full of understanding, and Sarah nodded. "It's not just a blanket, Dad. It's a sign," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It feels like someone finally heard me, really heard me." Her father sighed, glancing up at the falling snow. "I know what you mean. It's funny, sometimes, we get so wrapped up in the expectations, in the noise of the season, that we forget the deeper part of Christmas. His eyes met hers, and there was a deep sadness there, the kind of sadness that came from loss but also from love. Christmas isn't about the spectacle. It's about the heart. And sometimes, that means finding the unexpected moments of grace when we least expect them. Sarah smiled weakly at him, still clutching the blanket, but something was still missing. Her heart ached with the need for closure, the need to feel like her mother's absence didn't overshadow everything else. It was as though no amount of Christmas cheer, no matter how much love surrounded her, could fill the space that had been left in her life. But just as she began to retreat into her thoughts, a soft sound interrupted the stillness. There was a knock at the front door. Sarah stood up quickly, looking at her father in confusion. Who could be visiting on Christmas evening? They had just settled into their quiet holiday routine, the house now glowing warmly with the fire crackling inside. Her dad raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile spreading across his face. "I'll go get it," he said, standing up. "Stay right there, Sarah. Maybe another Christmas miracle is on its way." Before Sarah could protest, her father was already halfway to the door. She heard him greet someone, the low murmur of conversation drifting through the window. Then, to her utter disbelief, she heard the unmistakable sound of a familiar voice. "Mr. Andrews? I believe Sarah is home." Taylor Swift's voice. Sarah froze, her heart slamming in her chest. No way. She blinked rapidly, her eyes wide in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. The blanket, the message, it all seemed so surreal, so impossible. But now. This was too much. She rushed to the door, her pulse racing as she opened it wide. There, standing in front of her, was Taylor Swift herself. Her red scarf was wrapped loosely around her neck, and her eyes were soft and kind. Behind her stood a team of volunteers, carrying bags of gifts, each one wrapped in the most festive, glittering paper. Taylor gave Sarah a bright, warm smile, and in that moment, time seemed to slow down. "Hi, Sarah," Taylor said, her voice gentle but firm with sincerity. "I'm so sorry for the confusion this morning. There were some last-minute issues that prevented me from being here in person, but I wanted to make sure that you didn't feel forgotten. This is for you, with all my heart." For a moment, Sarah could do nothing but stand there, her mouth slightly agape, unable to comprehend the surreal turn of events. The snow fell softly around them, and Sarah felt 1,000 emotions rush through her: confusion, wonder, joy, disbelief. Her mind spun as she tried to piece together what was happening. I don't know what to say," Sarah finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Taylor smiled, stepping closer. "You don't need to say anything. I just wanted you to know that no matter how tough things get, you're never alone. Christmas is about more than the gifts and the events, it's about people who show up when you least expect them." As Taylor spoke, Sarah felt something shift within her, a deep sense of peace beginning to fill the hollow space in her heart. The grief she had been carrying all year long, since the loss of her mother, began to feel a little less heavy. She had been so focused on what she had lost that she had forgotten about the kindness that still existed in the world, the simple, unexpected acts of love that could make all the difference. Her father stepped forward, a warm smile on his face, and extended his hand to Taylor. "Thank you for this, Taylor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done more than brighten our Christmas. You've reminded us of what really matters." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude swell within her. This moment was something she could never have anticipated, and in its own way, it was a perfect reflection of the Christmas spirit. Taylor had shown up, not just as a celebrity, but as a human being, extending a hand of kindness when it was most needed. "Don't mention it," Taylor said with a chuckle, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "I've always believed in the power of community, and that's what Christmas is about, right? Coming together, even when life feels impossible." The volunteers behind Taylor began unloading the gifts, each one carefully placed in a pile by the front door. Taylor turned to Sarah, her eyes warm and sincere. "I also wanted to say that I've heard you've had a rough year. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Just a message away." For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah felt her grief begin to ease, replaced by something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. Hope that there was goodness in the world, that there were people who cared, that even in the midst of loss, there could be love. As Sarah watched Taylor Swift walk away, leaving behind a small mountain of gifts, each one a symbol of love and thoughtfulness, her heart swelled with emotion. She wasn't just holding on to a blanket or a gift. She was holding on to a miracle. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I think I finally get it." Her father looked at her, eyes glistening with tears of his own. "Yeah, kiddo. Me too. Christmas is a reminder that love is always there, even when we don't see it. It's never really gone." And as Sarah watched Taylor drive away, the soft hum of Christmas carols filling the quiet street, she knew that this Christmas would forever be the one that taught her the true meaning of the season: forgiveness, love, and the simple, unexpected miracles that make life worth living. The days following Taylor's surprise visit passed in a blur of wonder and reflection for Sarah. At first, she had struggled to believe that the Christmas magic could be real, not the flashy, consumer-driven version plastered across billboards or flaunted in magazine ads, but the quiet, tender magic that came with genuine acts of kindness, unexpected gestures of love, and the kind of connections that transcended the material. Sarah sat in her living room, the blanket Taylor had sent her draped across her shoulders as she gazed out at the snowy landscape. The warmth of the fabric seemed to hold the very essence of the holiday spirit: comfort, care, and a deep, profound connection to others. With every passing day, it felt more and more like a physical reminder of the emotional journey she had been through. The weight of her grief was still there, but now it was balanced with an overwhelming sense of peace. The morning after Taylor's visit, Sarah had woken up feeling different, like she was no longer carrying the burden of her mother's death alone. That ache, that longing, was still present, but it no longer defined her. It was a part of her, but it was no longer all-consuming. The grief no longer stood between her and the world, it had shifted from a wall to a part of the landscape. Her father, too, had undergone a transformation in the days following the events. For the first time in a long while, he had been more open about his own grief. As Sarah sat beside him on the couch one evening, their eyes met over a steaming mug of hot cocoa. The conversation had turned quiet, and Sarah could feel her father's usual guarded demeanor slowly crumbling. "You know, I've been thinking about what Taylor said," her father murmured, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "About the community, about showing up for each other when it matters most. I guess I've been so focused on keeping us afloat, on surviving, that I forgot about the importance of just being there for you, for us." Sarah's heart ached as she listened to her father, realizing how much weight he had been carrying himself. Over the past year, he had become the rock for their small family, always trying to shield her from his own sadness, always putting on a brave face. But now, seeing him speak so openly, Sarah knew that this Christmas had changed both of them. "I think we both needed this reminder," Sarah said softly. "That it's okay to let people in, even when it feels like we have nothing left to give." Her father nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. It was a rare sight, but in that moment, Sarah understood that his vulnerability was not a weakness, it was the strength of a man who was learning to heal alongside his daughter. The snow outside seemed to mirror their quiet breakthrough, each flake falling gently to the earth, a symbol of renewal, of things falling into place. As for Sarah, the gift from Taylor had unlocked something within her, a realization that she didn't have to carry her pain in isolation. The gesture had shown her that even the most unexpected acts of kindness could become lifelines, offering light in the darkest of times. She had been so focused on what she had lost, her mother, her sense of normalcy, the life they had once known, that she had forgotten to open herself to the love and kindness that was still out there. Christmas morning arrived, and as Sarah opened gifts with her father, she found herself filled with a sense of gratitude she had long forgotten. Her heart swelled as she thought about the community they had, family, friends, even strangers who had shown up when she needed it most. The past year had been a storm of emotions, and yet, here they were, standing together, stronger than before. Later that afternoon, Sarah sat in the quiet of the living room, looking down at the blanket. She traced the silver stitching with her fingers, lost in thought. It wasn't just a gift anymore, it had become a symbol of the healing she had undergone. Taylor's words had offered her not just comfort, but permission to embrace life again, to seek joy despite the ache of loss. And most importantly, it had reminded her that even in the darkest moments, the possibility of a miracle existed. Her father joined her, sitting beside her on the couch. "You know," he said, with a small smile, "we've had a lot of tough Christmases, but this one feels different, doesn't it?" Sarah nodded, her heart full. "It does. It feels like a new beginning." As they sat there together, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. Sarah wasn't the same person she had been when the holiday season began. She had learned to embrace the uncertainty, to open her heart to the love that was still present, even in the absence of the one she had lost. Her grief no longer defined her, it had become a part of her story, woven into the fabric of her life, just like the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. This Christmas, Sarah had learned that healing wasn't linear. It didn't come in grand gestures or perfect moments. It came in quiet realizations, in the small acts of kindness that reminded her that love, true, unconditional love, was never truly gone. It was always there, waiting for her to find it again. And this time, she had. For the first time in a long while, Sarah believed in miracles, not the flashy, grandiose ones, but the everyday miracles that came from the kindness of others, from the strength of family, and from the resilience of the human heart. She had found peace, not in the absence of pain, but in the recognition that even through the cracks, light could still shine through. The transformation that Sarah and her father had undergone in the wake of Taylor's unexpected visit rippled far beyond their small family home, touching the lives of those in their community in ways neither of them could have anticipated. It wasn't just about the gifts, the Christmas cheer, or the fleeting moments of joy, it was about the power of kindness and the profound impact of showing up for others, even when it felt like the world was too heavy to bear. A few days after Christmas, Sarah found herself volunteering at the local food bank with her father. It was something they had done in the past, but this year felt different. There was a renewed sense of purpose in their actions, a deep gratitude for the simple things. As they packed boxes of food for families in need, Sarah noticed how much lighter her father seemed, how much more open he was to the people around them. His conversation with the volunteers was warmer, more genuine, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. As they worked side by side, Sarah noticed a familiar face, a woman from their neighborhood, approaching them with a hesitant smile. Mrs. Callahan had always been a quiet, somewhat reclusive figure in the neighborhood, often seen only during the holidays when she would deliver cookies or small homemade gifts to everyone. This year, Sarah had noticed her absence, and she'd wondered if the older woman had been struggling. "Hello there, dear," Mrs. Callahan said softly, her voice carrying a tremor of uncertainty. I just wanted to thank you both for everything you've done this year. I heard about that wonderful visit you had, Sarah. The Taylor Swift surprise, and the blanket." Sarah smiled, but before she could respond, Mrs. Callahan's voice faltered. "You know, I've been going through a rough patch, too. Lost my husband a few months ago, and, well, it's been hard. Really hard. But seeing the kindness that's been pouring in from you and others, it's made me realize something." Sarah exchanged a glance with her father, who offered Mrs. Callahan a warm, reassuring smile. "You're never alone, Mrs. Callahan," Sarah said quietly. "You don't have to carry this burden by yourself." Tears welled up in the older woman's eyes as she reached out and squeezed Sarah's hand, her grip gentle but firm. "Thank you. It's been hard for me to let others in. I always thought I had to handle everything on my own. But what you and your dad did, it's like a reminder that there's goodness in the world. People care." Her words hung in the air, profound in their simplicity. For Sarah, it was a revelation of the broader impact of her own journey. Her family's story had been intertwined with grief, loss, and quiet resilience, but they had also, without realizing it, given others the permission to open their hearts again. Sarah saw it in Mrs. Callahan's expression, her hesitation melting away, replaced by the kind of hope that only comes when someone takes the time to show you that you are seen, that you matter. As Sarah and her father continued to volunteer, they noticed more people coming forward, some sharing their own stories of hardship, others simply offering a smile, a handshake, or a small act of kindness in return. It wasn't just about the material support they were offering, it was about creating a space where people could reconnect with their sense of humanity, where they could remember that even in the darkest moments, kindness had the power to light the way. In the days that followed, Sarah and her father made it a point to reach out to those around them. They invited friends over for dinner, checked in on neighbors, and even organized a small holiday gathering at the community center. The warmth and spirit of the season had woven its way into the fabric of their lives in ways they hadn't imagined. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about the simple, everyday acts of kindness that made people feel valued, loved, and understood. At the community center event, Sarah saw firsthand how contagious the spirit of generosity could be. The local children's choir performed carols, and the elderly in the neighborhood shared stories of Christmases long past. It was a celebration of togetherness, of community, where no one was left out. As Sarah looked around at the people she had known her entire life, she realized that the holiday season had brought them closer together, uniting them through shared experiences of loss, love, and renewal. The power of kindness, Sarah realized, wasn't in the grand gestures, it was in the quiet moments, the gestures that often went unnoticed, the times when people took a moment to look beyond their own struggles and care for someone else. It was a realization that had grown from her own journey, one that had begun with grief and loss but had transformed into a story of connection, healing, and hope. The ripple effect of that simple act of kindness from Taylor Swift had extended far beyond Sarah and her family. It had touched Mrs. Callahan, the volunteers at the food bank, their neighbors, and even the children at the community center who had witnessed how people could come together and create something beautiful, even in the midst of hardship. And as Sarah stood there, looking out over the gathering, she realized that the true spirit of Christmas was not just about receiving, it was about giving, about being present for others, about remembering that in the end, it was love, kindness, and community that would see them through the darkest times. The holiday season was drawing to a close, and as the last of the Christmas lights flickered out across the neighborhood, Sarah stood at the doorstep of her family's home, looking out at the quiet, snow-covered street. The emotional whirlwind of the past weeks had left her feeling a mix of exhaustion and peace, but there was still a gnawing uncertainty deep within her. Her grief over her mother's death still lingered, and though the kindness and support from those around her had made it easier to bear, a part of her still struggled to fully let go of the past. It was Christmas Eve, the night before everything would return to normal. Sarah's father had gone to bed early, tired from the volunteer work they had done together throughout the day. The house was still and calm, save for the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth. Sarah, wrapped in the blanket Taylor had given her, stepped out into the cold, the chill biting at her cheeks as she walked down the steps to the small patch of snow-covered garden. She wasn't sure why she had come out here. Maybe it was the stillness of the night, or the way the world seemed to pause at the edge of the holiday season. But she needed to think. She needed to understand what had changed within her. As she stood there, her breath forming clouds in the crisp air, she heard a familiar sound. A car approaching slowly, its tires crunching on the snow-covered street. She turned instinctively, and to her shock, the car came to a stop right in front of her house. The headlights dimmed, and the door opened. It was Taylor Swift. Sarah's heart leapt in her chest. She hadn't expected to see her again. Not like this, not on Christmas Eve. Taylor stepped out of the car, her presence as calming as it had been that afternoon. She looked at Sarah with a gentle, almost apologetic smile. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." The word struck Sarah like a wave, and all at once, the emotions she had been holding back seemed to pour out of her. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. She felt foolish, embarrassed, but the warmth of Taylor's words, the very fact that she had come back, touched her in a way that no gift or gesture could. I don't know what to say," Sarah choked out, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been holding on to so much for so long. And even after everything, even after all the kindness, it's still hard to let go." Taylor took a step closer, her voice soft and understanding. "Sarah, grief is a journey, not something you get over in a day. I know how you feel. I've been there too. But it's okay to let go, to open yourself to healing. It doesn't mean forgetting, it just means making room for new things. It's like the snow, sometimes, it feels cold, but when it melts, it makes way for something new to grow." Sarah swallowed hard, her chest tightening with the weight of everything she had been carrying. Taylor's presence, her words, were a balm to her soul. For the first time in months, Sarah felt the barrier around her heart begin to crack. "I'm trying," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "I really am. But it's so hard to feel like I'm not letting my mom down. Like I'm not forgetting her." Taylor nodded slowly, her eyes full of empathy. "Your mom would want you to live, Sarah. To find joy again. She would want you to carry her memory, yes, but also to let yourself be loved and to love in return." A quiet stillness settled between them, and for a moment, Sarah felt completely seen, completely understood. The weight of her grief, which had once felt so insurmountable, seemed lighter now, more bearable, because she had shared it with someone who had listened, who had given her space to feel. "I don't want to be stuck in the past," Sarah said, more to herself than to Taylor. "I just need to find a way forward." Taylor's smile was soft, but it held a depth of meaning. "And you will, Sarah. One step at a time. Christmas is a time for new beginnings, for fresh hope. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." In that moment, Sarah felt the last of her hesitations dissolve. She had carried her grief for so long, but it was time to let it go. She had felt a spark of healing from the kindness that had surrounded her, and now, standing there with Taylor, she realized that Christmas wasn't just about receiving, it was about giving yourself permission to heal, to grow, and to embrace the future. As the two of them stood in the quiet of the night, with snow gently falling around them, Sarah felt something profound shift inside her. The love of her family, the kindness of her community, and now, Taylor's unexpected act of compassion had unlocked a new chapter in her life. One where the pain of loss could still exist, but no longer had to define her. And as Sarah turned to go back inside, she felt the first true sense of peace she had experienced in a long time, knowing that this Christmas would be the turning point. The moment when she would let herself heal, embrace the future, and carry on the legacy of love her mother had left behind. As Sarah stepped back into the warmth of her home, her heart felt lighter, her steps more certain. The Christmas Eve air still clung to her like a reminder of everything that had happened, the pain, the healing, and the unexpected magic of the holiday season. She could hear the soft crackle of the fire in the living room, and as she approached, she saw her father sitting by the hearth, his tired eyes reflecting the warmth of the flames. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening as he noticed the change in her. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice still heavy with the weight of the past months. Sarah smiled, her heart full. She nodded, sitting down beside him. "Yeah, Dad. Everything's going to be okay." Her father's face softened, and he reached out to give her hand a gentle squeeze. There was an understanding between them now, no longer just the shared silence of grief, but a mutual recognition that they were both healing, moving forward together. Later that evening, as they sat down for their Christmas meal, Sarah felt the full presence of what the holiday was truly about. It wasn't in the perfectly wrapped gifts or the perfectly cooked dinner, it was in the quiet moments, the simple acts of kindness, the love that had flowed through their lives, and the new memories they were beginning to create. Christmas wasn't just about celebrating the past, it was about embracing the present and making space for the future. Sarah no longer felt the heavy burden of grief weighing her down. She understood now that love never truly leaves, it transforms, it stays with you, and it opens you up to the possibility of new joys, new experiences, and new beginnings. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, blanketing the world in a quiet, peaceful stillness. The magic of Christmas was in the air, not because of grand gestures or perfect moments, but because of the kindness shared between people, the compassion shown to one another, and the reminder that love, in its purest form, was a gift that could heal even the deepest wounds. As Sarah looked at the glowing Christmas tree in the corner, a sense of gratitude filled her chest. She had learned, through the kindness of others, that the holidays were about so much more than just a season, they were about carrying forward the love and lessons of the past, embracing the present, and looking forward with hope. This Christmas had been her turning point, the moment when she realized that even in the hardest times, there was always room for hope, healing, and the simple magic of love. And that, she knew, would be the gift she would carry with her for the rest of her life.